Greetings. So I noticed I don't have very many sort of beginning videos on the piano category of my lessons on my website. So I'm going to do a little introduction on basic chords and how they are formed and structured on this video. So straight off the bat, a chord is just a group of notes. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, generally, they are arranged in what are called triads, and then they are built on from that. In essence, a chord has a root, and in this case, C, and then a third, which you go up, do, re, mi, up a third beyond the C, and then a fifth, do, re, mi, fa, so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's our basic chord, or triad, okay? Tri, of course, meaning 3. And the triads come in 2 basic flavors. Well, actually 3. Or 4. Corrected myself there. We have major, as this one is. And in that case, we have 3 notes in between our root and our third, okay? And then we have 2 notes between our third and our fifth. Now, if we drop the third 1/2 step, that gets us a minor triad. And in that case, we have only 2 notes between the root and third, and 3 notes now between the third and fifth. So, major triad, minor triad. And they're very distinct in the way that they are perceived by our ear. So it's very easy to tell the difference between the 2. The third one is called a diminished triad. And that works by taking a minor triad and then dropping the 5th 1/2 step. So we have 2 notes in between each of the third and the 5th. Okay? The diminished ones are even more sort of abstract and unstable sounding, okay? And then the 4th triad is kind of the opposite of diminished, and it is called an augmented triad, okay? Diminish means to make smaller, augment means to make larger. So when we diminish the chord, we squeeze it so the notes are closer together. Boom. On an augmented triad, we take our 5th and raise it 1/2 step. And that means we have 3 notes in between the first and third, the root and third, and also 3 notes in between the third and 5th. And that is likewise a pretty unstable sounding triad, okay? Kind of used a lot in dream sequences and things like that in the movies. Okay, so those are our 4 basic triads: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Now, triads, like any chord, can be what's called inverted. All right, to invert something means to turn it upside down. So, if we take our C triad, take the bottom note and flip it so that it's on top, it's still a C major triad, but it's in inversion, an inverted triad, okay? And we can invert it 2 times, okay? So this is called first inversion, where we put the root on top. And then we can do one more where we put the third on top. And that's called second inversion, okay? Flip it once, flip it again. Because we have 3 notes, it can be in 3 positions. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. Okay? Now, the notes do not always have to be in order like this. We could have our C here, we could have our E here, and our G up here. It's still a C triad, and we can still invert it. We can still pop the C on top, and we still have a C triad in first inversion. Likewise, we can put the E on top, and we can put the G and C anywhere, and we still have a second inversion. Minor triads can be inverted as well. Put the C on top, put the E flat on top. Same with diminished. And augmented. Okay, now the important thing is to recognize these triads when you are playing a song. If you can recognize a chord in a piece of music, that cuts down on what you have to do as far as reading notes, okay? For instance, in this song, Alouette, we have chords in the left hand. Now, right off the bat, we have this chord, C, E, G. Now, if we are trying to figure out what these notes are one at a time, and we read first C and then see that we have an E and then say that we have a G, that's one way we can figure out what the notes are. But if we recognize that immediately as a C major triad, then we don't have to think about it any more beyond that. We just go boom, we hit our C major triad, and we're off to the races, okay? The other kinds of chords we might have are like this one, where we have what's called a broken chord, in that not all the notes are played together. We have a G, and then we have a B and a D. Now those together form a G chord, a G major triad, but they're separate. But no matter, as long as we recognize that as a chord and we just think, oh, okay, G major triad, I only have to play the first note separately and then the top two notes separately, then we're good. The analogy I make with my students is it's just like when we first learned how to read. And when we first did, we had to sound out the words based on what we knew of the letters and how they sounded. So, for instance, the word fingers, we'd have to think, okay, that's a f sound, ing for the next, and ers, fingers. Well, once we get comfortable enough with reading, we don't even think about it. We just see that word as fingers and we move on. And sometimes we can even get to the point where we see sentences and don't even think about the individual words, okay? Same thing with music. The greater amount of notes we can take in at a glance and recognize them as patterns, whether it's scales, which we'll talk about in a separate video, or chords, the easier it's going to be to read music and to play it. Now, this even goes to complicated songs that we all get to eventually in our piano career, like this. Right here, we have a series of notes that if you're a beginning pianist, that looks pretty complicated, and you gotta kind of go through and figure out what the heck are all these notes, especially when you get to these ledger lines, okay? Well, once you're experienced enough to know what the notes are, you will recognize that this is just all a big C chord. Now there's a G on the bottom, and then we have a C triad right here, C, E, G, and then up here we've got an E, another C, and another E. Okay, once you get experienced enough recognizing these sorts of things, you'll just see that as a C chord. It's inverted because the G is on the bottom, and then there's repeated notes above. thing again. This is exactly the same, G, C triad, but now we've got G, E, and G on top. So that is the reason that it's very important to start learning about chords. And it's one of the reasons that I start all my students off learning about chords right from the beginning, in addition to the books that we start with that teach us how to read notes and such. So, chords: major, minor, diminished, augmented. So play around with those. You can start it on any note that you want. C is the easiest to begin with, but you can do it on F, or G. Any note you can think of, you can play around with those chords. All right, enjoy.